Hi, friends.
Hi, friends.
We are back with our next episode of Friends Speaking Freely, and we've brought an extra friend along for this episode because he is more of an expert in this field than we are, even though we have gone down the rabbit hole and explored these topics. But we wanted to bring Eric along as
Hello.
the expert in voting and the Board of Elections. So,
Yay. All right. And I'm just going to give a quick, how I rabbit holed, and then we'll get to Eric. But I just want you guys to know that, my first time voting was in 2008. And that's when I was like, okay, you vote for a president every 4 years. Okay. And then it took a couple years for me to learn that you actually have an election every year. And it's not just you're voting every 4 years. And then maybe a couple years go by and I learned that you actually vote 2 times a year. There's a thing called the primaries. And then a couple more years go by and I learned that there are special elections. So sometimes you're voting 3 times a year. And then I also learned that there was something called early voting and that you don't just get to vote on the one day in November, but that there are actual weeks leading up to that day that you can go vote. And so also just last year, T and I learned that we had questions about party affiliation and how to select a party and all these things. And that's how we met Eric. And we had so many questions for him. And we still have so many, I would say almost weekly, we're asking and consulting you about something. And I just want to say that I've appreciated that you never make us feel silly about our questions and not knowing the answers. And even when there's been moments that you haven't known the answer, you go to work, you ask somebody, you get it figured out, and then you come back with the answer. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping that you're going to be able to share some things with our friends today.
I hope so too.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you landed up working at the Board of Elections?
Yeah. So it wasn't something I was necessarily looking for. Um, but so I was a stay-at-home dad and I was watching PBS and a commercial came on about working the upcoming election. And at that time I was feeling kind of alone. Um, you know, I was a Democrat in a not so or seemingly not so Democrat friendly place. And I didn't know if there was anybody else out there like me, you know. Um, but I
that's
thought, you know what?
That's
yeah,
fair
we,
because
we
I
hear that story
right,
often.
right. I think, and I
Everyone feels
personally have
alone.
also felt that way.
And
Yes.
look, here we are together now.
Right.
Um, so I thought, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? And I also heard that a lot of people were afraid. You know, I'm a combat vet, former police officer. What are they going to do? Shoot at me? So, and no, nobody shot at me or even threatened me. So,
But that I
um,
feel like, and I've heard that fear too. So I feel like that was a legitimate kind of fear. Is it a hostile? Can it be hostile? And yeah,
Especially in the current environment. Yeah. Over the
right.
last several years.
and it is, it's one of those things that until you get out and, if you're listening to the noise and if you're listening to the buzz, it is scary. But once you get out and start experiencing, other people and talking to other people, you realize that it's not like that at all. It's noise and it's buzz.
Okay, well, that's
Um,
good to know.
so I went ahead and I signed up on the website for to work at the pools. I went to my pool training and they're like, "Hey, how would you like to work part-time in early voting?" I was like, "Okay, sure, I'll give this a try." And now I've been there for a year and a half. I've been full-time for a year. My part-time position uh, um, transformed into a full-time position, and now I do this 24/7. And probably the nicest thing is, even though it is a political environment, you're not allowed to talk about politics.
Right, because everyone there has to stay like neutral and nonpartisan, right?
Yes and no. So
Okay.
we are all Democrat. We're all affiliated. Um, yeah, we're all affiliated. Um, so whenever you're working on a task, you have to work with somebody of the opposite party to ensure that integrity.
Okay.
So I work with Republicans a lot. Well, it turns out I kind of like them. We have things in common. As long as we don't talk about politics, we have things in common, and similar stories, and we're just people. And I think that gets lost in the rhetoric.
Sure, that's very encouraging, though. It kind of brings it all back down to a human level. We've talked before uh, about how we all have more things in common than not in common, and that's sometimes hard to remember, uh,
Right.
especially in the political environment. So, but
Yeah.
I'm glad it was a job that you enjoyed enough to roll from part-time to full-time and continue on with this group of people you're working with.
Yeah, and I feel I know you guys are always looking for volunteers. I feel like what I hear most is that you're always needing somebody to help work the polls.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little if you want.
Sure. Yeah, so right now for our county, we need 546, a minimum of 546
Wow.
pool workers.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
we have, you know, around 130 different precincts. We have 75-ish different polling locations within the county, and that's a lot of people for one day. Um, Also, we have part-time staff. How I started out, that also comes and works at the Board of Elections with us, because there's a dozen of us, and we can't do this all by ourselves. We need other people.
Sure.
You know, thus the nature of life and politics. um, you need other people.
How close
Um,
how close to those numbers do you get, Eric? How close to the 500 and
so this year we are about 100 off, but there's still time to go. Um, so, and we're having a hard time finding Democrats, especially in Wadsworth, and I know that there's people out there that have worked the polls before and that may have not had a great experience, or people that felt like I did, that it might be a hostile environment and you might have to, there, I know that there's people that are afraid of actual violence too, and those are legitimate concerns. But you know, beyond talk, there's action, and working at the polls is taking action. It puts you in contact with other people that are of, the same, that are of the same mindset of you, and also people that are of slightly different mindsets, and they're not scary. Yes, occasionally you might have to deal with somebody that comes in, not that works with you so much, but somebody that comes in that's like your racist uncle at Thanksgiving. And you deal with them, you deal with them in a customer service way. They go vote, they're gone. But you're not doing this by yourself. You have people all around you that are there to do their civic duty, to complete this project. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, it's long hours, but to complete this voting project, to ensure that democracy is alive and well. This is this is this is the one thing that you can do to support to literally support democracy.
Yeah,
This is the most democratic thing that you can do.
for sure.
and it makes me think that um on a scale of how people want to be involved, a lot of people don't like to work events, or they don't want a continuing involvement. So if you kind of pare that down, doing poll work, yes, it may be a long, tiring shift, but you can do your civic duty and you can go home and then you don't have to think about it. So that's just a different perspective of maybe how somebody could work it in, and not feel like, oh, I'm going to get a call now every week. Can you lit drop? Can you work a booth? Like that's
Mhm.
not the nature of this. And so that might appeal to some people.
Yeah. I guess I wonder too, like, okay, if T and I wanted to sign up and like do volunteer somewhere in Wadsworth together, would that even be a possibility, or would we just get kind of like divvied up and like wherever we need to go, that's where we'll be?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to be with somebody, you can definitely put that request in, and the person that, the Board of Elections is very accommodating because, we want you to come back. We want you to feel supported. We want you to feel like you are a part of the process because you are, you know. A lot of times they try to put you at your own precinct so you get to know your neighbors. And that's another really cool thing about working at the polls is you get to know your neighbors a little bit better. Like you recognize people. It's pretty cool. But yeah, you can, yeah, they do honor those requests.
Cool.
Um,
That's good to know. Okay. Well, something to definitely keep in mind. We have so many questions, so I do want to just kind of keep it going. But all right, what would you say to somebody who is just looking to get themselves registered to vote? What is the process? How would we get ourselves just to even be able to vote in the upcoming election?
Okay. So there are registration deadlines. And unfortunately for this election, the registration deadline ends on Tuesday at 9 o'clock.
Okay, so probably by the time this airs, we're already going to be past the time that people can register to vote for the primaries. However, what about in November?
So in November, it's always 30 days before election day that the registration deadline ends.
Okay.
But how you would go about registering is you can do it online through the Secretary of State's website. You can also go to your county Board of Elections website, which will transfer you over to the Secretary of State's website. You can also do it on a registration form that you can get from the Board of Elections. You can get from libraries, schools, the BMV. A lot of people register when they're updating their driver's license or doing business with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Job and Family Services. There are a lot of different county government organizations that are able to register you or update your registration. Also, if you move, please make sure that you update your registration because where you tell us you live when it comes to voting time has to fit where what we have in our system. So
Moving, and what about a name change if you were to get married and change your
yeah,
name?
absolutely. We have a name change form, or you can just do that on a regular registration form. Um,
Cool.
we keep a pretty extensive database. We're probably, as far as personal information goes, the Board of Elections is probably the largest and most secure database.
Good to know. Good to know. And then, all right, so like, what would you say to, I don't, maybe younger people who are looking at just the political climate right now and they're like, you know what, I'm not even going to bother. Votes don't matter. Not getting involved in this. I don't even know who I would vote for, etc.
Sure. Um, So, I went through a period where I thought, oh, well, when I vote for the president, there's the electoral college, and does my vote really matter? And I think that's a legitimate question. Um, so from what I found that, your vote does matter in the presidential election, but it matters more on a local level.
Mm,
Um, Having talked to directors of other counties, they have told me stories where uh, elections have literally come down to coin flips because there was an equal amount of votes for levies in multiple occasions. Yeah, if the equal votes. So it was literally decided by a coin flip. You know, and your local elections are where you have the most impact and is what most impacts you. You know, it's the people that live in your community. It's the people on your local school board. It's the people on your city council. You know, those are where the decisions are made that impact you the most. And I know that there is the, you know, the drama and the spectacle of national politics. And that's fun. You know, I like reality TV too. But you know, and I think when people are like, oh, I want to make an impact, that's what they think about. But you can make an impact on those things. And it is through the local level. It's grassroots. It's getting together with your neighbors. It's getting together, you know, building coalitions or just showing up. You know, that 90% of life is just showing up. You
Yeah.
know,
I,
you don't
I,
have
yeah.
if you don't
Yes,
have an opinion, talk to somebody else about it.
Right. Right.
Figure it
Yeah.
out.
That's fair. That's fair.
I was
Keep moving.
yeah, I was going to tie in how important it is to do it really most things at your grassroots level. That's where you're going to see your vote in action. That's where you're going to see your volunteerism in action. Danielle and I have definitely experienced that moving to this town that's conservative and not knowing if the full uh, city was really being equally represented. So we kind of jumped in with both feet and already see the huge upsurge in people getting involved with us because
Yeah.
everyone who came to pick up yard signs here had the same exact story Eric had. Every single one of them, if they were 25 or 85, they said, ugh, we just feel alone. And it's nice to know you're there. And that's how last February, 4 people showed up at a meeting. And this year, 29 people showed up for the same meeting.
Yeah, and T, that's how like basically you and I met too, because I was feeling the same way. Like I'm in this town feeling all by myself in these thoughts and found you know, I'm on the neighbors pages finding you and learning I'm not the only one who, you know, thinks and feels that way. So truly we're all coming from very similar stories and
Yeah.
backgrounds. Yeah.
So the empowerment really, I think, comes from the grassroots level, which is new to me. I wasn't involved in any of this and never thought I'd be doing a podcast or talking about things like voting. But it's very energizing and they all kind of interconnect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
get
Did
more on
we
with
touch on like early voting and the fact that that starts this week? Do we want to say anything about, you know, the fact that early voting starts on Wednesday and like what early voting, why is this important and all the things?
and what is it? What
Yeah.
is early voting?
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
Sure. So early voting in the past few years is we've really seen there's really been an uptick in people. You know, at first it was, you know, you have your snowbirds that aren't going to be here for the election that want to come in early. But I think some of the rhetoric around, you know, polling locations uh, in our current climate has pushed as it gives an alternative to where you don't have to go to your polling location. You can go to the Board of Elections. It's at 3800 Stonegate Drive in Medina, Ohio. And you can, starting on February 21st, you can go in and cast your ballot. So there are, I won't get too much in the minutia of it, but it is basically an absentee ballot. An absentee ballot. You're casting your same ballot, but it would be like different options you would have in voting is you can do you can have your ballot mailed to you. It's classified as the same ballot, same type of ballot. It still counts the same. It's just you're doing it early. So you
Which,
can,
can I just say, is helpful for someone who, like, I feel like when I first started voting and it was one day only from this time to this time, as someone who like couldn't leave their job and things like that in the middle of the day, like the option to go on a Saturday or whatever, or just like later hours after work has been a dream. Honest, like I think that's what motivates me to get there and actually do it, is like having the freedom to do it weeks in advance.
yeah, absolutely. I can give you the hours here. So, February 21st through the 23rd, we're at 8 to 5 p.m. Then February 26th through March 1st, we're at 8 to 5 p.m. And then we go into expanded hours, and you can find all of these times on the Medina County Board of Elections website. But yeah, we open up Saturday voting and Sunday voting, um, and later time schedules. So if you are working, if you have things going on, we want you to be able to come and vote. But you have 30 days before the election, uh, and also election day. So, and plus, if you come and voted early voting, then you're free to work the elections
Oh,
as a poll
okay.
worker.
Okay, good to know, right? Okay, T, does this bring up any like last final questions for you before we close out?
I do. I
Okay.
have this question. I just pulled it up on my phone. So the League of Women Voters had posted, this is for our young, like seniors in high school. It says 17-year-olds who will be 18 by November 5th can register to vote in the March primary, which is fascinating to me because they won't be 18 at that point, some of them,
Mhm.
and they can sign petitions to get issues onto the ballot.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's amazing that we can take these teenagers and kind of give them early access to the system. And I don't know how many of our viewers, but maybe some of their parents are watching this and would encourage them to do that. I know with my goddaughter, 17, won't be 18 till June, but I've already encouraged her to gather up her friends and get registered to vote, because then she can participate starting March.
19.
19th?
Yes, but that does bring us back to the point, they would have had to do it before the 30 days, right? So
Yes,
before this airs, all right, so I need to let her know she has to do it like Monday or not at all.
Right.
But it does still open up maybe for the November elections.
correct. So my son is 17 and in the same in the same category this year. Yeah, if you're 17, you can vote in the primary election on things that will be on the November election. So if you're things that will not resolve in this election. So if you're 17, you can't vote on your local levies, and you wouldn't be able to vote on like central committees members, because those things are decided this election. But you can help the parties decide who they want to be on the November ballot, um, as long as you're 18 by November 5th.
Sure, that's pretty
Cool.
powerful.
That's
It
so good to
is.
know. Yeah, love that.
Absolutely. And I've seen a lot of 17-year-old registrations come in the past few weeks. So it's really encouraging.
That's awesome because all I ever hear is like, where are the young people? They're not involved.
They're
So
there, they're
that's great.
just,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
they're
just
busy.
not retired. So
Right.
they have different hours.
Right. Right. Well, I think that's, yeah.
No, I was gonna ask if there was anything else Eric wanted to add before we
Oh,
wrap
yeah.
up.
I mean, yeah, anything else you want to add that we didn't
The
get
highlights?
to?
Uh, no, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we find that other people have more questions after this episode, maybe we'll do a part 2 or something. I mean, I feel
Sure.
like we're always learning and there's probably so much more we didn't even cover. So thanks for being here. If you have any questions for us, comments, you can email at friendspeakingfreely@gmail.com. And I think we're gonna try to get with our editor to probably put in all those links that Eric so kindly sent us to for the Board of Elections. And yeah, I guess we'll see you guys next time.
Yep.
Bye, friends.
Bye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.